Alright, in Standard 4, the student will identify ideological, military, and diplomatic aspects of the American Revolution. We want to concentrate on some military aspects of the Revolution. Alright, so let's look at George Washington. 4C says analyze George Washington as a leader. And there's a semicolon, and there's that magic word, include. So we're going to talk about George Washington and his role as a military leader. That's what we're going to do. Include the creation of a professional military and the life of a common soldier, and describe the significance of the crossing of the Delaware River and Valley Forge. George Washington was commander of the Continental Army during the American Revolution. He's going to fight against the British as a general. He was chosen by the Second Continental Congress to be the leader, commander of the Continental Army during this revolutionary period, the Revolutionary War. And George Washington was going to be remembered for his leadership as a military commander. He is going to be considered one of the greatest Americans because he overcomes great odds and difficulties, and he's going to help the United States win the Revolutionary War. Overcome odds and difficulties, didn't give up, and then it's going to eventually lead us to winning the Revolutionary War. A lot of people thought we had a lot of odds against us. Alright, so 4C. Let's look at analyze George Washington's military leader. Let's focus down here on the crossing of the Delaware River aspect of that. The crossing of the Delaware River. Okay. One of the things we need to remember before we go into the crossing the Delaware River is that are some of the challenges of George Washington. Is he lost a lot of battles before the Battle of Trenton. Much of his military was a bunch of farmers and frontier hunters. A lot of them deserted. There was not a lot of money for items needed in war. And some of his other challenges, when he took command on July 3rd, 1755, as general, supplies were very low. Not a lot of supplies to fight this war. And from February to October 1776, he had to withdraw from New York City. New York City is going to fall to the British, so he's going to lose that big engagement there. And then another problem he had was a lot of the enlisted soldiers a lot of their enlistments were expiring, and they were not re-enlisting. They only for one year long. He asked the Continental Congress to extend those, but they refused. So that's a problem. And a lot of desertions were going on because of these losses in war and these heavy casualties and withdrawing a lot. So troop morale was at an all-time low. And Washington wasn't having a really good time when he took command, but he never gave up despite the odds against him. And that's why we remember him. He fought through, and in the end he wins. So he's a story of challenges faced and overcome, and that's one of the reasons we discuss him. And all right, so let's talk first about this crossing of the Delaware River. If you recall, we talked about in our understanding of geography in Unit 1, we talked about where New Jersey was. Here's the Delaware River, and we spoke about the Delaware River in Unit 1. Let's see. Let's go to Google real quick and let's look up Trenton, New Jersey. And if we go there on a map, let's see, there's Trenton. Let's come out from Trenton. That's where we're going to be talking about the crossing of the Delaware. If you remember the Atlantic Ocean out here, and we talked about triangular trade, and we talked about the geography of the colonies being on the eastern seaboard of the United States, or the Atlantic coast, what we call it here. The Atlantic Ocean's out here, and this huge bay called Chesapeake Bay we're going to return to in a minute. And north of it was the was the Delaware Bay over here. Let's get a little closer. Here's Delaware. There's the Delaware Bay right there. If we go up into the Delaware River here, and we hit Philadelphia, and if we look, let's draw back Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Right out here, that's Pennsylvania. There's Philadelphia. But if we go on up in to New Jersey, if we cross over the line and go into New Jersey, we see Trenton, New Jersey here. Yeah, but that's the Delaware River coming up here. And George Washington's going to cross over that Delaware River. Let's get a little closer. Here's the Delaware River here on the New Jersey-Pennsylvania line. And then 1776 on Christmas night, he's going to cross over. Let's go up here. There it is. Washington's crossing here. You can go there today. There's monuments there on both sides of Washington crossing here. And Washington's going to cross here on the Delaware River, and then he's going to head downward to Trenton on Christmas night, December 25th. The Battle of Trenton's going to happen on December the 26th that morning, and he's going to defeat the British and Hessian and British soldiers there. They were celebrating Christmas, and he sneaks across in a surprise attack and takes them off guard and wins a major victory for the Americans there. But there's Washington Crossing State Park. All right, let's minimize that. Well, let's look at New Jersey here. Here's New Jersey right here, and let's minimize that real quick. So that's the crossing of the Delaware. Let's review back over some of this stuff. Here's a site. There's Trenton, New Jersey. December 25th, 1776, while the British and Hessian soldiers slept, Washington's troops crossed over the Delaware River and then surprise attack against them at Trenton, New Jersey. We refer to that as the Battle of Trenton. And on the Battle of Trenton on the morning of December 26, 1776, there was an American victory there, and this victory is going to be a much needed morale boost for the soldiers. And we can look at a different map here. Here's where he crossed over at McConkley's Ferry, and Washington's going to come down. Ewan's going to cross over here, and they're going to attack Trenton here and win the Battle of Trenton. But this is the Delaware River. You see it there, and that's the crossing that happened there. And in 1851, a painting was made of the crossing that's very popular by Emanuel Lutz, as a German artist. Makes this picture. It shows the icy waters of the Delaware, and they had to push it out of the way and get across. They say it's historically inaccurate, extremely historic. But there's George Washington standing on the bow of the ship while his men row across the Delaware. And in 1999, when the United States government minted new coins, they put the image on the back of the New Jersey quarter, and down at the bottom it said "Crossroads of the Revolution," meaning that this was a turning point, really. And here's that old picture of Emanuel Lutz, 1851 portrait showing the crossing of the Delaware River. And if we recall, one of the things we have to do with this is we have to talk about the significance of the crossing of the Delaware River. The significance of the crossing of Delaware. So let's do that real quick. The biggest significance of the crossing of Delaware is that before it, there was a long series of defeats, and those us losing battle after battle after battle, meaning George Washington's troops, going to cause their troop morale to dip further and further down. A lot of desertions, a lot of people not re-enlisting, and then that's going to cause a problem with American victory over the war itself if that keeps happening. So then there's this victory at Trenton, New Jersey, this victory after the crossing of the Delaware River. Then what that's going to do is, one, significant. It's going to boost the morale of the troops and then have them fight on and end in a victory of the American Revolutionary War. Okay, let's look at analyzing George Washington as a military leader when it comes to the focus of the life of a common soldier in Valley Forge here. Valley Forge happened in December 1777, 1 year after the crossing of the Delaware. It's the lowest point for the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War, where 2,500 out of 10,000 soldiers are going to die of disease and exposure. Another thing they're going to do in the life of the common soldier and some of their sufferings, they're going to starve. They won't have much food to eat. The harsh winter there was really what caused this exposure to kill a lot of them. And they're going to go without adequate clothing and shelter. Some didn't even have shoes. And here's a picture of Valley Forge showing you, the winter there. George Washington here. And here's a map. Valley Forge is not too far from the Delaware River, from Trenton, New Jersey. Here, some other engagements are at Germantown and Brandywine between Trenton, the Battle of Trenton, and Valley Forge. Valley Forge is going to happen 1 year later, 1 year after the Battle of Trenton, crossing the Delaware. Okay, all right. Let's look back here at analyze George Washington as a military leader. Let's talk about include the creation of a professional army, and this also goes into Valley Forge down here. Instead of feeling sorry for themselves, George Washington had his troops train and become more professional. They had to run, they had to exercise, they had to drill, and because he didn't have a professional army to begin with, or a professional military to begin with. Had a bunch of farmers, frontier hunters, inexperienced and not well trained military. A lot of those people are going to desert under fire, under heavy artillery fire on the battlefield. They're going to run away from the enemy. But there was no money for weapons, gunpowder, clothing, or other supplies. That's another series of issues he had, and that's one of the reasons why the French alliance and that foreign assistance was important for American victory in this war. But one of the things George Washington does to make his military more professional, he enlists this guy, a Prussian by the name of Baron Frederick von Steuben, and von Steuben's going to start this full-scale training program at Valley Forge. During Valley Forge, the winter there, while they're suffering, he's going to start this full-scale training program, and he's going to drill Washington soldiers and make them into more of a professional army. Some of the things he's going to do is he's going to train them to align correctly, how to hold that line, and then how to reload their muskets and refire in the correct order, and then how to use the musket and the bayonet. And a bayonet is that long knife at the end of the musket. There's the musket, there's the knife. If you shot and somebody run up on you, you'd have to use that knife to protect yourself with it. So von Steuben is going to be instrumental in making George Washington's military more professional, and he's going to actually have a book that he authored that talked about the order and discipline within the troops, and he's going to have them, the ones who can read it to the ones who cannot. And so this drill book is going to help them become more professional. A lot of my students have had experience in the past. They forget this. They forget his connection with the training of the military for George Washington, because they get him confused with names like Marquis de Lafayette. Marquis de Lafayette, I told you, it's not very academic, but students remember his name Lafayette from the song Laffy Taffy they listen to, and they connect him with the winning of the Battle of Yorktown. This guy here, Baron Frederick von Steuben, again, not very academic, but they remember his last name, Steuben, sounds similar to stupid, calling someone stupid. And they said they could see him, when Washington's troops were messing up in their drills, him yelling at them, calling them stupid. Now that's not very nice, and not very academic, but if it will help you make a connection with this guy and training of Washington's military, then by all means use it if it'll help you remember. Okay, so that's the creation of the professional military. Alright, let's review real quick and see what leadership of George Washington shows that he was a great leader. Crossing the Delaware, he after he lost a lot, he never gave up. There was low troop morale, still never gave up. And then he crosses the Delaware River on Christmas night, 1776. He's going to win and boost the morale of the troops. And the next one, Valley Forge, even though 2,500 of his men died from death and the elements there that winter, doing without, even though they did that, he had the leadership to make them get up and train with Baron Friedrich von Steuben, and he made them become more professional and more disciplined. And then he created this professional army out of this ragtag group of farmers and frontier hunters. So, and von Steuben's going to help him train them in the use of musket and bayonet, how to properly form, and how to keep the line, how to line correctly, how to reload, and his army is going to become more professional. So we see in these things how Washington exemplifies himself as a great leader. And that's the end of this. I hope this helps you understand 4C. And I hope if you have any questions, to ask me in class. If not, just look at this tutorial again. George Washington was going to be remembered for his leadership as a military commander. He is going to be considered one of the greatest Americans because he overcomes great odds and difficulties, and he's going to help the United States win the Revolutionary War. Overcome odds and difficulties, didn't give up, and then it's going to eventually lead us to winning the Revolutionary War. A lot of people thought we had a lot of odds against us. Alright, so of a professional military and the life of a common soldier, and describe the significance of the crossing of the Delaware River and Valley Forge. George Washington was commander of the Continental Army during the American Revolution. He's going to fight against the British as a general. He was chosen by the Second Continental Congress to be the leader, commander of the Continental Army during this revolutionary period, the Revolutionary War. And a bunch of farmers and frontier hunters. A lot of them deserted. There was not a lot of money for items needed in war. And some of his other challenges, when he took command on July 3rd, 1755, as general, supplies were very low. Not a lot of supplies to fight this war. And from February to October 1776, he had to withdraw from New York City. New York City is going to fall to the British, so he's going to lose that. 4C. Let's look at analyze George Washington's military leader. Let's focus down here on the crossing of the Delaware River aspect of that, the crossing of the Delaware River. Okay. One of the things we need to remember before we go into the crossing the Delaware River is that are some of the challenges of George Washington. Is he lost a lot of battles before the Battle of Trenton. Much of his military was. Alright, in Standard 4, the student will identify ideological, military, and diplomatic aspects of the American Revolution. We want to concentrate on some military aspects of the Revolution. Alright, so let's look at George Washington. 4C says analyze George Washington as a leader. And there's a semicolon, and there's that magic word, include. So we're going to talk about George Washington and his role as a military leader. That's what we're going to do. Include the creation